I think one of the issues with respect to the war on drugs is, which is based on a lot of misinformation, not factual information, is that if you take a person away from the opportunity to do drugs and lock them up, when you release them, they'll no longer have the desire to do drugs. It's simply not true. There's drug use, there's drug abuse, and there's drug addictions. And people will choose freely how they alter their state of consciousness for whatever reasons they choose to do it. And putting them in jail will not stop that. So I'm one of the people that believe that the drug problem in this country, which is significant, is really more of a public health issue than it is a crime issue.
The United States has more people incarcerated than any other country in the world. And as a superintendent of a county jail, can you give us any insights on why you think that is?
Well, there are a lot of different theories. The latest statistic that I've heard about the population versus incarceration is that the United States has about 5% of the world's population, and we have 25% of the world's inmates. So there's a significant disparity there between the people per 100,000 versus the number of people incarcerated per 100,000. Recently in the news it was cited that for the first time in the history of the United States, we now incarcerate 1 per every 100 people in this country, which is pretty significant. There are a lot of different schools of thought about what's causing that. When you look at the academics of it, you look at the textbooks, people that do research, criminal justice experts that are trying to get their finger on the pulse of why this is. It seems to come directly to the war on drugs is responsible for a significant part of this increase. And that has to be so, because when we look at the data, we see that violent crime in the United States is at a 30-year low. So if violent crimes are at a 30-year low, it begs the question of why do we have to continue to build 900 new jail beds every 2 weeks in this country? Why do we have to hire another 150 correctional officers every 2 weeks in this country?
Now, in your experience, what's the breakdown between people who are here for victimless crimes and those for crimes against persons and property?
It's a moving target, quite frankly, and it depends on the jurisdiction where you're looking at. I've read periodicals that say 40% of the country's inmate population doesn't need to be incarcerated. When we look at the number of people that are here and what percentage are considered a threat of flight, escape, or violence, we're about on par with that figure. The last time that I looked at victimless crimes, the mala prohibitum crimes, how many of those were here, it was probably 13%.
So you don't feel that the current setup really facilitates rehabilitation as far as arrests for drug use? It's not gonna make people well.
My position on rehabilitation is this: we have 65% of the inmates that come into this institution. That would be 65% of around 1,600 inmates a year. When we ask them, "Are you interested in rehabilitation programs?" they say yes. And then they get processed into the system. And only 6% participate in those programs. You can't mandate those programs. The person has to be willing and want to do them. So what we see is that there is a lack of self-motivation to engage in something that would help them. And you can't force that. You cannot say to an addicted person, or to a person who abuses drugs, or to a person who simply uses drugs, we're going to mandate this program for you, and when you get out, you won't want to do that anymore. We need to wake up. That's not going to work. First of all, a user is not necessarily a person that is in need of a rehabilitation program. A person who needs a rehabilitation program is an addict who has a strong desire to no longer be an addict. That person is an excellent candidate for a rehabilitation program. All others, in my view, waste of resources, waste of time, waste of energy, and results in recidivist type behavior.
Could you just give a little bit more detailed background on what the organization is and maybe how long you've been a member?
Law Enforcement Against Prohibition was founded in, I want to say, 2003, I think, and it started with 5 founding members. They were police detectives and undercover agents who worked for the Drug Task Force in this country, putting thousands of people into the prison system. All of these police officers, and some of them are very distinguished. We're talking about Chief Stamper, who was the assistant chief in San Diego, the police chief of Seattle, Washington. You're talking about Jack Cole, who was undercover in New Jersey for some 26 years. Peter Christ, who was the patrol captain in Tonawanda, New York for many years. These are people who have worked in areas with greater populations than we have here, greater drug problems than we have here, have retired admirably, are still considered very admirable representatives of law enforcement. And those 5 founding members have now recruited almost 10,000 people to have joined Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Almost 1,000 of those are police officers. There are judges, there are detectives, there are United States Marshals that are members of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and we are growing significantly every day. And because we believe that the war on drugs is a significantly failed policy. My involvement with LEAP happened back in December of 2007, just this last year, a few months ago, and I was challenged by a state legislator to view a 12-minute video of LEAP, which anybody can view on the website. You just click on it and you can see the 12-minute video. But he had it on a CD and he gave it to me, and I viewed it, and I was so intrigued and impressed with the level of professionalism and the resumes of the people, the founding people of LEAP, that I listened to their message, and I actually contacted the Speakers Bureau and said, I really want a speaker to come to where I teach and talk to the students here. And so they provided us with a speaker. And after that, we had some emailings back and forth, and I was kind of on the fence because, you know, when you're first approached with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, it makes you nervous. If you're a law enforcement person, it's like that dedicated soldier who's out on the battlefield, and the veteran soldier comes up and says, gee, I don't think this is a good idea. And of course the young guy's out there trying to do the right thing because that's what he's told, that's what he's trained. So it makes you nervous, it makes you a little bit apprehensive, but when you begin to talk to the veterans, you begin to understand the battles that they've been in, the fight that they've fought, how they come to the decision where they are, you begin to take those steps in that direction. And LEAP said, tell you what, we'd love you to come to New Orleans to a conference, and we'll pay the conference fee, and we'll put you up for a weekend, and all you got to do is whatever you want to do. You know, we'd like you to sit in on some of these trainings, and if you do, it'll be great. If not, that's fine. Just, you know, make yourself comfortable. So I went to this conference in New Orleans, and I sat in on these different trainings and was absolutely blown away by what I learned about the statistical data that exists through government sources that suggests that the war on drugs is a failed policy. And that's where I met a lot of the LEAP members and decided in December of 2007 that I would join. And very shortly thereafter, I became a vetted speaker for LEAP, and I'm happy to do that. and we need to approach it differently. How the idea came about was really that of Peter Christ, as I understand it. And between 1968 and 1972, we had the Vietnam War going on, and there was what was called an opposition movement to the Vietnam War. And this is where soldiers who were tasked to go over and fight and do these things saw the war, some of them doing more than one tour of duty, much like we're doing now, get to that point at which they say this war is not effective. This war is being counterproductive. And then, of course, we had a lot of naysayers. But this opposition movement came from soldiers, the most patriotic of people. The people who had the most to lose, the people who are most heavily invested in the war, are saying this isn't working. And that's different from college kids who have never been there, who are protesting it. And Peter Christ said there's a very, very significant parallel between the opposition movement of Vietnam, what's currently going on in Iraq, and law enforcement officers with respect to the war on drugs. And that's exactly what's happening. The most ingenious things that President Nixon ever could have done was give this effort the title War on Drugs. Because in this country, when you declare war, it is for liberty, it is for patriotism, it is for justice, it is for freedom for all. That's why we go to war. So when you establish a war on drugs, the people that pay their taxes think, well, that's what we're going to do. We're doing something that's good for everybody, and we need to do it. The second reason why that's an ingenious title, if you're not in favor of it, you're against it, and if you're against it, well, you must not be patriotic. The third reason it's an ingenious title, there's two ways to get out of it: victory or defeat. And in the history of the United States, we've never accepted defeat. There was a man from Scotland who said, you know, one of the things that makes it very difficult to change the policies after 40 years and $1 trillion, it's like putting toothpaste back in a tube. You know, how do you take this magnificent agency like the Drug Enforcement Agency, which is funded with billions and billions of dollars? Think of the number of people that are employed in the United States of America because of the way that people choose to alter their consciousness. It is a magnificent economic machine which suddenly is in jeopardy if everybody agrees that the war on drugs is no longer a war and that we approach it differently.
And do you think, not necessarily in this case, although you could say how it would apply or not apply, it sounds like it wouldn't so much, do you think that overall in the United States we'd have a need for as many prison facilities as we have if we had decriminalized certain offenses such as drug possession? Or do you think we would be able to reduce the number of facilities we would need?
Well, the statistics are very, very clear on this. You know, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and their website is www.leap.cc. Anybody that looks at that site and peruses it, and you can download some of the PowerPoint presentations that the executive director, Jack Cole, has put together, you will see the startling statistics of people who are incarcerated for what Law Enforcement Against Prohibition considers to not be a crime. So it's very clear that if we were to have a kind of society that put violent criminals in jail and provided structure that they need in order to protect society, protect the offender, and not incarcerate people who don't need to be, we have a much better system. The Law Enforcement Against Prohibition folks also argue if you took the money that we put into incarcerating these people and not really making much of a difference, and you took that money and diverted those resources into public health and education and opportunities, we'd have a better result. And you can't deny the statistics when you look at them. You cannot deny the success of jurisdictions that have done that. and countries around the world that have done that. The fact is, it does make a significant difference.